I never thought my life, a perfect facade of luxury and power, could unravel in a single day. I'm Veronica, the woman who stood beside an empire-building titan, draped in designer elegance, living in a penthouse that gleamed like a crown over the city. For 15 years, I've been the untouchable queen by my husband Richard's side, our marriage a fortress of ambition and allure. But this morning, as I gazed out at the skyscrapers piercing the dawn, a chilling unease crept into my bones, whispering that something dark was stirring beneath the surface of our polished world. What I uncovered in the heart of his glass-walled office shattered everything I believed about love, loyalty, and the man I thought I knew. Will the truth destroy me, or will I rise from the ashes? Picture this: a single crimson rose, wilting on a polished marble countertop, its petals curling inward as if guarding a secret. That's how I felt this morning, standing in the vast, echoing penthouse that has been my gilded cage for 15 years. My name is Veronica, and at 43, I've sculpted myself into the woman you see reflected in every gleaming surface of this life, poised, untouchable, and married to a man who commands empires. Richard, my husband, is the iron fist behind Nexus Dynamics, a corporate juggernaut that sprawls across industries like a spider's web. Our marriage, a carefully negotiated alliance of ambition and allure, has held strong for a decade and a half. His drive paired with my grace, we were the ultimate power couple, a force that turned heads and silenced rooms. Richard himself is a presence you can't ignore. Towering at over 6 feet, with broad shoulders that seem to carry the weight of every deal he's ever closed, he's in his late 40s now, his salt and pepper hair adding a distinguished edge to his razor-sharp demeanor. Always in tailored suits that cost more than most people's cars, he exudes control, his deep voice resonating with a confidence that borders on arrogance. I've stood by his side at countless galas, boardroom battles, and high-stakes dinners, playing the role of the flawless wife. Polished to perfection, articulate in every word, and draped in designer gowns that hug every curve, I'm his living trophy. He revels in it, parading me before the elite as if I'm the ultimate proof of his triumph. I can still see his office in my mind's eye, perched on the 50th floor of Nexus Dynamics headquarters. It's a glass-walled fortress, offering a panoramic view of the city skyline that stretches out like a kingdom under his rule. At the center of it all is his massive mahogany desk, polished to a mirror sheen, which he calls the heart of the business. I've heard him joke with partners over glasses of aged scotch, his tone laced with both pride and a subtle threat, that this is where everything gets decided, not just the numbers, but the fates of those who dare to cross him. His laughter after those words always sends a chill down my spine, though I've learned to mask it with a practiced smile. Among the many faces that drift through that office, 3 stand out in my memory, though I didn't yet know why they'd linger in my thoughts. First, there's Harold Grayson, a grizzled older man whose sharp gaze seems to cut through pleasantries, as if he's always sizing up his prey. Then there's Daniel Voss, a slick, younger entrepreneur with a smile that's all teeth, predatory in a way that makes my skin crawl. And finally, Ethan Caldwell, a quiet, calculating figure who rarely speaks but always watches, his eyes taking in every detail like a chess player plotting 10 moves ahead. I've met them during presentations, where Richard insists I play the part. As the first light of dawn crept through the floor-to-ceiling windows of our penthouse, I stirred awake, the silk sheets cool against my skin. The city below was already humming, a distant symphony of ambition and chaos, and I lay there for a moment, letting the weight of the day settle over me. This wasn't just any morning, it was the prelude to something monumental, though I couldn't yet grasp its full scope. I slid out of bed, my bare feet meeting the heated marble floor, and padded over to the sleek kitchen where the espresso machine awaited my touch. The aroma of freshly ground beans filled the air as I prepared my ritual cup, strong and black, just the way I needed it to face whatever lay ahead. Standing by the window, Coffee in hand, I gazed out at the sprawling urban jungle. Skyscrapers pierced the sky like spears, their glass facades reflecting the rising sun in a dazzling display of power. This view always grounded me, reminded me of the empire Richard and I had built together, or at least, the empire I'd helped him polish to perfection. I took a slow sip, letting the bitter warmth steady my nerves, then turned to the walk-in closet. Today demanded precision, a calculated choice of armor. I ran my fingers over rows of designer pieces before settling on a form-fitting navy dress, its cut sharp enough to command attention, yet elegant enough to soften the edges. Gold accessories, a delicate necklace, dangling earrings, and a bracelet that caught the light just so, completed the look. I wanted to exude confidence, allure, a silent promise that I was more than just a pretty face at Richard's side. Downstairs in the dining area, Richard was already seated, his broad frame hunched over a tablet, a plate of untouched toast pushed aside. I slid into the chair across from him, the clink of my coffee cup against the glass table breaking the silence. He barely looked up, his fingers tapping furiously on the screen, his jaw tight. "Gotta seal the deal today," he muttered, more to himself than to me, his voice clipped and edged with something I couldn't quite place. I studied him over the rim of my cup, catching a flicker in his dark eyes. Nervousness, maybe? It was unfamiliar, unsettling. Richard didn't do nerves. I brushed it off as stress, chalking it up to the high stakes of whatever was brewing at Nexus Dynamics. "You've got this," I offered softly, but he just grunted, his focus glued to whatever was on that screen. The chauffeured car was waiting for us downstairs, its black exterior gleaming under the morning light. I settled into the plush leather seat beside Richard, the city blurring past us as we cut through the heart of downtown. My mind was a whirlwind, rehearsing my role for the day. Smile, charm, support. It was a script I'd memorized over the years, one I could perform in my sleep. But today felt heavier, like there was an undercurrent I couldn't see, pulling us toward something I wasn't prepared for. As we stepped out of the car and into the towering glass structure of Nexus Dynamics headquarters, the weight of the day pressed harder against my chest. The elevator ride to the 50th floor was silent, the hum of the machinery the only sound as Richard stood beside me, his presence both a shield and a cage. When the doors slid open, we walked straight into his office, that glass-walled fortress overlooking the city. The stage was set, and I was ready to play my part. The meeting began with the usual parade of power. Harold Grayson, Daniel Voss, and Ethan Caldwell were already seated around the massive mahogany desk, their tailored suits and steely expressions a mirror to the high stakes at play. I took my place beside Richard, offering a polished smile as I nodded at each of them. The air was thick with the scent of expensive cologne and unspoken agendas. Richard launched into his presentation, his voice booming with authority as he tossed around terms like profit margins, market shares, and quarterly projections. I played my role flawlessly, nodding at the right moments, letting out a soft laugh when a dry quip was made, my hands folded neatly in my lap. But beneath the surface, I could feel the tension building, a storm brewing in the room that I couldn't quite pinpoint. The investors exchanged glances, subtle, fleeting looks that darted between them like coded messages. I caught them out of the corner of my eye, and a flicker of unease stirred in my gut. What were they signaling to each other? Richard's demeanor started to shift as the discussion deepened. His usual animated gestures slowed, his hands gripping the edge of his desk with a tightness that made the veins on his knuckles stand out. His voice remained steady, but there was a strain in it, a crack in the armor of his control. I watched him closely, my mind racing to decipher what was happening. Then, without warning, Daniel Voss pushed his chair back, the sharp scrape against the floor slicing through the room's tension like a blade. My eyes snapped to him as he stood, his movements deliberate, almost theatrical, as he rounded the heavy mahogany desk and approached me. My breath caught in my throat, every muscle in my body locking up as he stopped just inches away. His presence was suffocating, his cold fingers brushing lightly against my wrist, sending an icy jolt through me. My heart pounded so hard I thought it might burst, and I turned my gaze to Richard, desperate for some sign of outrage, some protective instinct to kick in. But what I saw in his eyes stopped me cold, intense, unblinking, and undeniably complicit. It hit me like a physical blow. He wasn't going to stop this. He wasn't even surprised. My mind spiraled into chaos, a storm of shock and confusion tearing through me. How could this be happening? Richard, the man who'd built an empire with me at his side, the man who'd sworn to protect our image, our legacy. How could he just sit there, watching, as if this was part of the plan? Betrayal clawed at my chest, sharp and raw, sinking deeper with every second that passed. I wanted to scream, to pull away, to shatter the polished facade I'd worn for so long. But I couldn't. My body froze under the weight of Richard's stare, as if some unspoken command held me in place. I was a pawn in a game I hadn't even known I was playing, and the realization burned through me like wildfire. Harold Grayson and Ethan Caldwell rose from their seats as well, their expressions morphing from detached professionalism to something darker, hungrier, predatory. The room seemed to shrink, the glass walls closing in as the three men surrounded me, their shadows looming over me like vultures circling prey. What unfolded next felt like a surreal nightmare, detached from reality, yet painfully real. I didn't pull away, didn't fight, as if Richard's gaze had stripped me of my will. On that polished mahogany desk, the so-called heart of the business, everything I thought I knew about my role, my marriage, crumbled. Harold's hands were rough, gripping with a force that left no room for doubt about his intent. Daniel's. The silence that followed was suffocating, a heavy shroud draped over the office as if the very air had turned to lead. I stood near the desk, my navy dress slightly askew, the fabric clinging to my skin in a way that felt wrong, like a betrayal of its own. My hands trembled, fingers twitching uncontrollably as I tried to anchor myself to something, anything, that could make sense of the storm raging inside me. The investors, Harold, Daniel, and Ethan, had returned to their seats, their faces now masks of cold indifference, as if the last few minutes hadn't just shattered the foundation of everything I thought I knew. They resumed their discussion about the merger, their voices low and clinical, tossing around figures and timelines like nothing had happened, like I wasn't even there. My pulse raced, a frantic drumbeat in my ears, each thump echoing the chaos in my mind. Heat burned in my cheeks, a flush of shame and confusion that I couldn't shake off, no matter how hard I tried to steady myself. My chest ached, a deep, hollow pain that seemed to carve out a space where my trust used to be. What had just happened? Did I want any part of it? Did I even have a choice? The questions spun in my head, a dizzying spiral with no answers, only more doubts. And Richard, why didn't he stop it? Why didn't he say something, do something, anything to pull me out of that nightmare? I glanced at him, my eyes pleading for an explanation, for some shred of the man I thought I'd married. But he just sat there, calmly watching me, his expression unreadable, a wall of stone where I needed a lifeline. Then he stood, the movement slow and deliberate, as if he had all the time in the world. He adjusted his crisp white shirt, smoothing out invisible wrinkles with a precision that felt almost mocking. My breath hitched as he walked toward me, his polished shoes clicking softly against the hardwood floor, each step a countdown to something I wasn't sure I could face. The investors didn't even look up, their focus glued to their papers and tablets, as if this, whatever this was, happened every day. As if I was just another item on the agenda to be dealt with and dismissed. Richard stopped close to me, too close, his presence towering and inescapable. The sharp, familiar scent of his cologne hit me, a mix of cedar and something darker, a scent that used to mean safety, but now felt like a warning. He leaned in, his breath warm against my ear, and whispered something. I won't say what it was, not yet, but the tone, oh, that tone, cut through me like a blade. It was cold, calculated, almost triumphant, as if he'd just won a game I didn't even know we were playing. A shiver raced down my spine, icy and sharp, spreading through my limbs until I felt like I might shatter right there in front of him. I pulled back just enough to look into his eyes, searching for something. Remorse, anger, even a flicker of the man I'd shared a life with for 15 years. But all I found was a strange satisfaction, a glint of something dark and unyielding that made my stomach twist. My throat tightened, words I wanted to scream trapped behind a wall of shock and fear. I opened my mouth, but nothing came out, just a shaky breath that betrayed how broken I felt in that moment. Richard didn't wait for me to find my voice. He stepped back, his movements smooth and controlled, and gestured to the investors to carry on with the meeting, as if I was no longer relevant, as if I'd served my purpose and could now be ignored. I stood there, rooted to the spot, feeling smaller than I ever had in my life. A pawn, that's what I was. A piece on a board I couldn't see, moved by hands I didn't recognize. Everything I thought I knew about our marriage, about the life we'd built, unraveled in my mind like a thread pulled too tight. Was this always the plan? Had I been blind to the truth all these years, dressing up in designer gowns and playing the perfect? I stumbled away from the center of the office, my legs unsteady, the weight of what had just transpired pressing down on me like a physical force. I needed to escape, even if just for a moment, to gather the fragments of myself that felt scattered across that cold, polished floor. I murmured something about needing a break, my voice barely above a whisper, and made my way to the private bathroom adjacent to Richard's office. The door clicked shut behind me, a small mercy, sealing me away from the suffocating atmosphere of that glass-walled fortress. Standing over the sleek marble sink, I turned on the faucet, the rush of cold water a sharp contrast to the heat still burning in my cheeks. I cupped my hands, letting the icy stream pool in my palms before splashing it against my face. The shock of it stung, but I welcomed the bite, hoping it would snap me out of the haze clouding my mind. I did it again, and again, until droplets trickled down my neck, soaking into the collar of my navy dress. Lifting my head, I caught my reflection in the mirror, and the sight stopped me cold. The woman staring back at me was a stranger, eyes hollowed out, dark circles smudged beneath them like bruises, lipstick smeared at the edges as if I'd wiped my mouth in a hurry. My skin looked pale, almost ghostly under the harsh fluorescent light, and for a moment, I didn't recognize myself. Who was this broken figure? Where had Veronica, the poised, untouchable wife, gone? As I gripped the edge of the sink, my knuckles whitening, Richard's whispered words from moments ago echoed in my head, each syllable a dagger twisting deeper. You did well, Veronica. This is how we grow. His voice had been low, intimate, laced with a sickening pride that made my skin crawl even now. I replayed it over and over, dissecting every word, every inflection, until the meaning crystallized in my mind with brutal clarity. He wasn't just approving of what had happened. He'd orchestrated it. This wasn't a spontaneous lapse or a moment of weakness. It was a calculated move, a twisted strategy to bind the investors to him through some perverse sense of loyalty or shared secret. And I was the tool, the offering laid out on that mahogany altar to seal the deal. My role in his empire, our marriage, everything I'd believed in, it was all reduced to a transaction, a cold exchange of power where I was nothing more than currency. A wave of nausea crashed over me, bitter and sharp, rising in my throat until I had to press a hand to my mouth to keep from retching. I leaned forward, my forehead resting against the cool mirror, my breath fogging the glass in shallow, uneven bursts. How had I not seen this coming? How had I let myself be molded into this, into someone who could be used so callously? But as the sickness churned, something uglier, more insidious, clawed its way to the surface. A confession I didn't want to face, but couldn't deny. I didn't entirely regret what had happened. Not completely. There was a part of me, buried deep beneath the shame and betrayal, that had felt a rush, a dark, electric thrill in the danger of it all, in the raw power that pulsed through the room as I became the center of their twisted game. I hated myself for it, loathed the way my pulse had quickened not just from fear, but from something primal, something I didn't want to name. Yet there it was, undeniable, a shadow within me that had reveled in being seen, in being wanted, even if it was for all the wrong reasons. The shame burned hot, searing through my chest, but alongside it was a strange sense of liberation. Admitting this to myself, even silently, felt like shedding a skin I'd worn too long. I wasn't just the victim here. I was complicit in my own way, drawn to the edge of this abyss by a curiosity I couldn't suppress. The self-loathing was there, heavy and suffocating, but so was a flicker of something else, a resolve, a decision forming in the chaos of my thoughts. I wasn't going to crumble. I stepped out of the bathroom, the cold water still lingering on my skin, a temporary shield against the storm inside me. My legs felt steadier now, though my heart still raced as I returned to Richard's office. The atmosphere had shifted in my brief absence. The meeting was winding down, the investors gathering their papers and briefcases, their voices a low murmur of final agreements. I stood near the edge of the room, my arms crossed, watching as handshakes were exchanged with a kind of mechanical precision. Harold Grayson's grip was firm, his smirk a silent declaration of victory. Daniel Voss flashed that predatory smile of his, all teeth and no warmth, while Ethan Caldwell gave a curt nod, his calculating eyes flicking briefly to me before returning to Richard. They were satisfied, smug even, as if the day's events, every twisted moment, had cemented something unbreakable between them and my husband. Promises of finalized contracts hung in the air, their words dripping with the weight of deals struck not just on paper, but in darker, unspoken ways. It was eerie, the normalcy of it all. Richard stood at the center, his posture relaxed now, his voice as smooth as polished glass as he thanked them for their time. "Gentlemen, I appreciate your commitment to this vision. We'll have the paperwork ready by next week." His tone carried that effortless authority I'd heard 1,000 times, as if nothing out of the ordinary had transpired, as if the very foundation of my world hadn't been ripped apart just hours ago. I stayed silent by his side, my face a mask of composure I'd perfected over years of playing the perfect wife. But inside, I was a tangle of raw nerves, every word, every gesture from him feeling like a fresh cut. I wanted to scream, to shatter this facade of civility, but I didn't. I couldn't. Not yet. The investors filed out, their footsteps echoing in the vast office until the glass door clicked shut behind them. The silence that followed was heavy, pressing against me like a physical weight. Richard turned to me then, his expression softening for the first time that day, a flicker of something almost human crossing his sharp features. He stepped closer, his voice low, almost intimate. "We did what we had to, Veronica. This is bigger than us." His words hung between us, heavy with a conviction I couldn't share. I stared at him, searching those dark eyes for a hint of regret, for anything that might salvage the man I thought I knew. But there was nothing, just a steely resolve, a belief that the ends justified every means, no matter how vile. A storm of emotions churned inside me, resentment, sharp and bitter, clashing with a weary resignation. I knew he believed what he was saying, that in his mind, this was all for some greater purpose, some grand design I was supposed to accept. But I couldn't. Not fully. My trust in him, in us, had been shattered, ground to dust on that mahogany desk. Yet, despite the betrayal, I didn't argue. I didn't lash out. Instead, I nodded, a small, tight gesture, playing along as if I agreed, as if I could stomach this new reality. But my mind was already elsewhere, spinning with thoughts of what came next, of how to navigate this treacherous landscape I'd been thrust into. I wasn't done with Richard, not by a long shot. If this was the game he played, I'd learn the rules, and I'd play to win. We left the office soon after, the elevator ride down to the ground floor as silent as the one up had been, but heavier now, laden with everything unsaid. The chauffeured car awaited us, its black exterior a stark contrast to the fading light of the day. I slid into the leather seat beside him, the city lights beginning to flicker on as dusk settled over the skyline. I stared out the window, watching the blur of neon and glass streak past, a kaleidoscope of colors that mirrored the chaos in my head. Richard didn't speak, didn't even look at me, his focus straight ahead as if I were invisible. And in a way, I was glad for it. The silence gave me, don't forget to subscribe, like, and comment if you enjoyed this story. This will help us create more engaging stories for you.